Hello, good morning. How's everyone going? Good evening, good evening. Good to have you guys in here. All right. I'm just gonna go ahead and get started straight away because I might have to finish today a little bit earlier. Hey Chris, hey Abraham, Winston. How's it going? Cool. All right, so I'm gonna continue working on the Sci-Fi corridor. We are about, I think it's, let me check. We're about 8 days. We have about eight days left in the contest. I'm just gonna check quickly. So yeah, basically the idea is to give you guys more tools and tricks and stuff that you can use for your projects for the contest. You still have time, but the deadline is fast approaching. So here we go. So about 8 days. Yes, about 8 days, and there's some artworks already in the gallery. So if you go at the bottom and you can click on vote, you can actually vote, and there's going to be a people's award. So the one with the more amount of votes will also get a little something. So yeah, so there's some pretty cool stuff. You can just click here and vote if you want to vote. Only one vote per person, obviously. But yeah, start submitting your artwork. We are getting closer and win those awesome prizes. Okay, so just want to get that out of the way. Also, I'm going to share with you the Corridor Sci-Fi brush in case you want to follow along. I mean, it's just the same brush that I have open at the moment. Just going to get the shareable link, and I'm going to put it in here. So you click on this link. It's just a brush file from ZBrush. Obviously, you need ZBrush 2020.1.1 to work with this, but it just gives you access to these brushes, these simple meshes that I created in case you want to, do your own and follow along, or feel free to use these assets in any way that you want. But I thought what we could do today is start working on the details. So I have set up a few cameras here just to help me sort of focus on certain areas, and I'm going to show you a couple of really cool techniques. This is kind of like the idea that I have for the render, and I'm just going to draw here. Oops. Sort of to give you an idea what we're going to do. So the main shapes and the main areas that we have are already established in a way, like let's say the primary forms and the structure of the corridor. That's done with this brush, but I want to go ahead and add some bolts and little details around here, maybe some grids around the bottom, maybe some tubing, some sort of some kind of pipes, not everywhere, maybe just in a couple places, maybe some cables. Maybe it's not a super well organized spaceship. I don't want to make it like a wreck or like an abandoned one. It's still gonna have the light and everything, but I just want to add a little bit of asymmetry with these details. Maybe add some control panel here, a couple of stuff here. I don't know, we'll see how we go. But that's the idea. Maybe some lights or some meshes at least that we can utilize later on as lights. I might also do kind of like a grid right in the middle, and then we just cover it and then through here we can just draw some pipes and that sort of thing. But yeah, just roughly to give you an idea what the intention is for today. All right. So let me go ahead and move back. So if you remember, what we have is a couple of meshes. Actually, let me switch to the move brush. So if I go into solo mode, so this one is actually two things. It's a simple nanomesh plane, just as a quick recap so that you remember what we're doing. And it has an array mesh. So again, it's just a nanomesh. If I show placement, it's just a plane. So we had this plane, and we draw those pieces into this plane, created the nanomesh. We hit the show placement so that it looks kind of like we actually model this, but it's just a nanomesh piece. And then we use the array mesh to just flip it over. Basically, that's all there is. Right? I'm going to turn it off, the array mesh, for the time being, just because I want to be able to see it, to see only one. And we did the same thing for this top bit. It is exactly the same thing. So we have a nanomesh, right? And we had an array mesh so that we can mirror to the other side. The rest of the meshes are the same. So this one is just a single frame that also has the array mesh. And which one? I think that's it. The other ones are pretty straightforward. So the frame for the door is slightly different, and the floor itself, the door, and that's it. The frame, that's it. Yeah. So those are the only meshes that we currently have. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with this one, because obviously this is the one that I want to spend a bit of time working on some details and, like I said, doing grids and that sort of thing. So what I thought we could do is just do another element brush, or we can even add it to the current one that we have, but with some details and some pieces that we can utilize as details. Okay. Let me just check the chat. Yeah. Well, the idea, yeah, it is modular. The idea was to speed up kind of like this process and being able to recreate more of these scenarios. Cool. Hey, side effects, how's it going? Good to have you here. All right, so let's go ahead and start with that. Hang on. All right, just want to be able to make sure that you guys actually see what I'm doing. So I'm gonna just jump into a different tool, and I'm gonna create a couple of objects. Let's just see. I think I'm gonna go for a grid. The bolts and nuts and things like that, we can do that with another element brush, and maybe some kind of switch or switchboard panel type of thing. I think that would be good. Just looking at this to see what else we can do. All right. So I'm going to select anything, make it a Polymesh 3D, so any object, doesn't matter. And I'm going to go to the Initialize tab here at the bottom. I'm going to start with a simple panel, or like a simple box with switches and stuff. So I'm going to use a Q-cube. So that's a super simplified cube, right? And I'm going to give it a single polygroup. Turn perspective off, bring in the gizmo, and I'm going to set up the overall shape. So something like that. I don't want to make it too prominent either, but I'm going to give it a bit of depth, and then we can control how much we embed it into the other mesh by using the embed option here of the brush. All right, let's bring in the C modeler. And I'm going to insert an edge loop, probably around there. And another one at the bottom. So this one is kind of like, I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to make out of this, but we'll see. let's go ahead and mask the top bit and the bottom one, inverted. And I'm just going to scale in the x-axis. I'm also should be working with symmetry. And the idea is just to be able to create these sort of like diagonal edges, just to be kind of like a bit more in line with the rest of the design, that it has like this type of, you know, like you could see this is almost like the door in a way. So I think that's fine. Let's go ahead and tag these ones, these polygroups, these faces. Right click and let's click on insert, entire region, click and drag. Let me undo that. So right click, insert region, just gonna do border only. The problem with that is that's gonna just be hollow. Now let's just keep it simple. Center and border. Alright, let's change to Q mesh. Right click, polygroup all, so that we affect only the polygroup, and we can push this in a bit. Holding Alt as I push and just create a different polygroup. And let's just repeat the action. So insert, polygroup all, just to create another one. And I think this one is not straight, so I'm gonna go ahead and mask this area, or mask these vertices. Inverted, center the gizmo to the unmasked area, and then just flatten those. And I'll do the same thing for this bit here. All right. I could also do the same thing at the top. So let's just do that very quickly, just to keep it clean. Center to the unmasked areas, flatten. Same thing here. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and push this one forward now with the Q mesh. And it just creates that sort of paneling effect. All right, I think that's all. That's all I wanted to do in terms of the structure. Let's go ahead and do some asymmetry for this. So I'm gonna tag these two, maybe not those two. Let's actually bevel this. So this edge here in the middle, I'm gonna bevel that about there. So you guys still see that this is kind of like I'm thinking about the design as I sculpt, or not sculpt, model with the C modular, but I don't really have an idea in mind. I have a rough estimate of how this should look, but I'm making changes as I go. So yeah, I'm gonna tag these two, Q mesh, push this up, and I'm gonna add a new insert around here, and I want to create a tiny little bit of elevation here, but I want to make sure that this one's sort of like attached to the blue one. So I'll show you what I mean. This is just harder to explain. With the Q mesh selected, I'm going to tag these two, click and drag, oops, from this, and there we go. So I wanted to create this elevation type of thing. That should be good for a couple of lights, or maybe an indicator or something in there. And I'm going to add a couple more things in here. So I'm going to tag this area, insert that entire region, something around there. That's cool. And I'm going to mask this entire polygroup. So a quick way to mask by polygroup inside or using the C modular is to right click on the polygroup. It doesn't really matter which polygroup really, and select the mask option in the C modular actions, and then select polygroup all. That way we can mask the entire polygroup. So I can click on that, and now I can bring in the gizmo, invert the mask, center to the unmasked areas, and then we can just play around with this. So I'm just gonna put something around the middle and actually mask the rest. I'm gonna push this just to make it a bit more irregular. And let's go back to the Q mesh. I'm gonna go ahead and extrude this a little bit. I think that's good. Let's go ahead and bevel this one. And maybe I'm gonna use this one to create some kind of lock here for this panel. That should be pretty easy. So I'm gonna tag this polygroup right in the middle, and if I use the Q mesh, click and drag, whoops, it should already grab it, so that's fine. Great. So just to create that kind of like lock, I'm gonna use all of these polygroups or all of these points, and I'm also gonna extrude that holding Alt to create a different polygroup, a different color, so that you guys can see. And I'm gonna do the same thing, click again. And the reason I did this twice is not only to create a edge loop in the middle, but also I will be able to tag this and extrude it a little bit, so it creates that indentation in there. Again, it might not be anything, but it works. And now here, just to fix this weird area, I'm gonna tag this one and attach this to there. There we go. And I think that's working a little bit better. So just to test how everything is looking, we can go ahead and do dynamic subdivision, and again we're gonna use this to create more assets and put them into the corridor. Let's see. If you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to obviously ask them in the chat. Cool. All right. So let's go ahead and switch material. I'm gonna toggle polyframe off, and let's go ahead, open up the geometry palette, and on the dynamic subdivision, if you click this one, you'll see basically the result. Obviously we need to change a few things, but it gives you a rough idea of what this is going to end up looking. So we can increase this with a Q grid of 1, and that already gives you that nice beveling effect. We can increase the smoothness just to make it smoother, and just play with the coverage. Maybe I don't want bevel, I want chamfer, which is a bit smoother. Or actually, let's just keep it constant. I do want to keep the hard edges here, so I'm gonna have to add a couple of extra polygroups or polyloops. But I think this one works. What we can do now is, with polyframe enable as well as dynamic, let's go ahead and insert a few edge loops just to sharpen some areas. So I can push this one up, sharpen those edges in there, and I want to do the same thing for this area here, so make this a bit more interesting. All right, and the same thing here. So just adding edge loops. If you want to do this kind of like you know, like keep this even more, like even cleaner, and you're thinking of using this as a proper asset, you probably want to spend more time thinking about the topology and how you place these loops, because obviously there's some areas that we don't really need to have this amount of edges, but this is not the case for what we're doing with this asset, so it doesn't matter, and it looks a lot better. So there we go. I'm gonna toggle dynamic off. I'm gonna try to fix this area in here as well. So I'm gonna tag these polygons. Let me switch material, and I'm gonna click and drag, but I'm gonna hold the shift key, and the shift key is just going to move those that way. So I have a flatter line in there, and I can just go ahead and use the masking tools to just make sure this is flat, centered to the mask areas, flat that. Can give it a bit more thickness and push this one back a bit. Cool. Alright, so I think I'm happy with this. Again, this would only work once we use dynamic. The problem with just using dynamic and in a single object like this is that if when you insert this mesh, the mesh that you're inserting it into or adding it to, if it doesn't match the same settings that you have in the dynamic subdivision, it's not going to work, or it's just going to work differently, right? So what we can do is toggle dynamic off, leave it as it is, and then we can just split it and work on this. The other option that you have is just use dynamic, don't use QGrid, and then just make sure that you sharpen some of these edges with creasing. So let's just see what that does very quickly. Under the crease panel, I'm just going to crease by polygroup. Yeah, the polygroups are all over the place, but you see it creased some areas, right? If I crease everything, it's just going to give me a very sharp area, but then you can tweak the width of the bevel. So that might be just an easier way to go about it. Yeah, that's not bad. I'm going to go ahead and no, I'm going to undo that. So basically, I'm going to leave it without dynamic subdivision, and then I'll figure out the settings later on. One thing I want to do to complete this one is just to add a couple of details so that we don't have to do that afterwards. And we can use the IMM parts here. Just going to do a couple of bolts that are going to be the same size of my brush. So something about there. Click and drag. Oops, symmetry on. Click and drag. If I hold the shift key, sorry, the control key, they're gonna snap to the same size of my brush. So let's do the same here. Click and drag, hold control, and it will snap. That's not too bad. I'm going to do a couple more here, but this is going to be some kind of, I don't know, don't know what this one is going to be. It's part of the security, I guess, for this box. Let's add a couple of tiny ones. And you can play around with a few things. Let's see. I'm going to use not the machine part, the IMM model kit. So this one also comes with ZBrush. And I'm going to use this for some lights, some things that could be lights. I reckon this one would be fine. So I'm going to drag this one in, and I'm going to use the Gizmo 3D. I'm going to hold control as I drag to duplicate this, and then before I let go of the click, I'm going to let go of the control, and that is going to allow me to duplicate this multiple times exactly at the same distance or length between them. So again, that's just like you normally would duplicate holding control and drag. But hang on, let's use this one as well. Holding control and drag to duplicate, and then when you let go of the control, it's basically going to do that duplication based on the distance that you moved the mouse in the first place. All right, and I'm just gonna do a couple of cables, or let's see, this should be at the bottom. Let's see. Here we go. Let's use these panels on the other side. Let's do that again. All right, so you see that doing this just takes really no time. Once you have the base, just adding tiny little bits of details. We can use some of these panels as well. We can even push this one all the way in. There we go. Then hold Control, click and drag. Oops, that's not a straight line. Let's reset that. There we go. Control, click and drag. Alright, let's try to fix this arrangement. The good thing is that we have polygroups, so we can easily isolate stuff. Oops. And I'm going to go ahead and mask all of this except this bit. Oops. Again, let's do this again. So I'm going to mask all of that. Oops. I'm going to hide maybe everything but this. Hide the rest, mask this bit, should be fine. Invert the mask, and I can push this up just a tiny bit. There we go. Alright, so I think this sort of panel is working fine. Let's do a couple things here. It's going to be very tiny, just some kind of tubing that goes inside this part of the box. Holding Control and duplicate. And I think that's it. I'm not gonna overdo it. But you see, it's just a bunch of insert meshes, arrange them differently, and you know, the base works really nice. So we have this detail, and then we can just populate that across the entire set of walls or any base that we have. So let's see if we have any questions about this. Hey Oscar, what we're building. So we're doing the same thing as we did before. So we just keep working on the corridor. We're just working on some individual assets that we can add to it. Is that IMM different from VDM? Yes. So IMM is an insert multi-mesh brush. That's pretty much this. It has a bunch of individual meshes that you can insert. VDM stands for vector displacement maps, which obviously they will work if you have a lot of geometry. So it's kind of like an alpha, like an image, and based on the values of that image, you will distort the mesh. Whereas this one, instead of distorting it, is adding new meshes. So they're quite different. I don't know why you would do hard surface in ZBrush. Like anything else, ZBrush is just a tool. So if you're comfortable with it, why not? I mean, this only took about what, 20 minutes, I guess, just to put this together. Of course, if you're familiar with Blender or 3D Max or any other tool and it's faster for you, for sure. Again, they're just tools. It's just about what you feel comfortable with and what fits in your workflow, I think. Cool. All right, so now that I have this, what I'll do is, where is my brush? Nope, my brush. The Sci-Fi corridor, I'm gonna make sure I have perspective off. I'm seeing this from the front, right? Holding shift to snap the camera. And I'm going to click on the brush. Actually, let's bring in the brush to the right so you guys see what I'm doing. On the right hand side, I'm gonna go to create, and I'm gonna click on create insert mesh, right? So that's how you create these multi-mesh insert brushes. So create that, and I already have this one selected, so I wanna append this current tool or this current mesh into my IMM for the corridor. I'm gonna click append, and I'm just gonna skip this node until the next restart. This is just information, and now we have this mesh that we can just do, you know, insetting and create a bunch of these. Cool. Let's go ahead and go back to what we had before. So this bit, and I'm gonna create a couple more things this time, maybe simpler stuff, because like you see, we can use the already pre-made or already built in meshes in ZBrush or IMMs that comes with ZBrush to detail the entire thing, and like bolts, and that stuff is pretty easy. So I want to create another custom made object. Let's do the tubing or the pipe. So I'm gonna duplicate this one, and I'm gonna go to the initialize tab, and this time I'm gonna create a cube. Actually, let's keep it simple. I'm gonna delete this one, and I'm gonna click on the tool palette, and I'm gonna click on cylinder 3D. So I'm gonna use this one to create a couple of things. Turn on polyframe so you guys see what I'm doing, and on under the initialize tab we can control this a little bit faster. So 32, I'm gonna reduce this to 16, and that's about really that's about it. So I'm gonna scale this up as well, just so that we have more control over these lines, and I'm gonna make a polymesh 3D so that we can edit it. All right, so I'm gonna duplicate this thing just so that we have an original that we can come back to it quickly. And this one, we're going to create this sort of like pipe that goes up. It's going to be actually pretty simple, so I don't know why I moved it so much, but let's keep it simple. I'm going to actually right click on the edge loop. I'm going to revert some of the stuff that I did. I could have done that from the initialize tab anyway. So delete the edge loop complete, and I'm just going to delete all of this, right? And then we can bring this down. So this is going to be the base. Cool. Let's go to a different mesh, and I'm going to go ahead, bring in my C modeler, and let's have some fun with this very quickly, building this. So I'm going to tag all of these polygons, QMesh, polygroup all, extrude that. I'm going to scale. I want to scale the entire thing to the center of the polygons. So mesh center, nope. I want polygon center, nope. Polygroup all, there we go. Polygon center, right? And then we can just keep doing this, holding alt to change the polygroup. Let's insert that now, just to create some border. QMesh, push this down, holding alt to create a new polygroup. Inserting this as well to create that gap. QMesh, push this up, And I'm gonna also, yeah, let's do another one. And let's scale this down. All right, so I want to do some kind of how would you call this? Kind of like a grid around it. Let's see how we go. I think the easiest way will be to just do a tube and then extrude some faces. Let me just think. Yeah, I'm just gonna do that. So QMesh, push this up. Insert this bit. Oops. All right, and then I'm just gonna do a QMesh here. Push this in, and then we can just add a couple of polygroups. Sorry, a couple of edges, just to sharpen this bit a bit. And the one that I want to do is in this area. Just thinking that I think the easiest way would be to create a bunch of polygroups, and that's it. You'll see what I mean in a second. So insert multi-edge loop so that we have multiple ones as we drag. Probably something around there should be okay. And now, yeah, let's push these ones in. So let's select the blue ones. Push that in. Oops. Make sure I'm gonna give these ones a different polygroup, or I'm gonna work with symmetry and radial symmetry. So how many did we did? We did 16, right? So if we do 16 in the radial symmetry, right? So we have, let me just explain this quickly. So if I enable radial symmetry and I select 16 counts, in other words, 16 instances of my cursor in the radial symmetry, because that was the amount of polygons that we did around the original cylinder, this one. So if you go to initialize, the H divide was set to 16, meaning there are 16 faces creating that cylinder. If we go here, we should have the same thing. We just need to match the axis. Right now it's set to the Z axis. We need to match it to the one that is going to be useful for us, which is the Y axis. So now I can basically select only one of these, and it will be the radial symmetry is going to select the rest. So I can just hold the Alt key, select. I changed my mind. I'm going to use these ones, right? So I only select this line of polygons, but the radial symmetry does the rest. So now I can just toggle this off. QMesh, push this in, holding the Alt key. I'm going to do it just a tiny bit to add a polygroup, an edge loop there, holding the Alt key again just to assign a different color. And let's do the same thing again. Push that in quite a bit more. Hold the Alt key, and then once more. Okay, cool. So that's about it, really. Let's insert another edge loop. Oops, single edge loop around there and there. All right, so that's kind of like the base. What we can do now is take the other one that we created. I'm going to duplicate it again. Select that. I'm going to scale it down. Move it like this. And actually, let's move it to the left side. Okay, so it was still in the center. I just move it to the left on the x-axis. I'm gonna scale this down, scale it up, and it's gonna be kind of like the tubing that's gonna go through this area. And I'm gonna leave this. Hang on. I probably need to push this in a bit. So again, this is very easy with this radial symmetry. I'm gonna tag this polygroup here. I'm gonna use the QMesh, click and drag and hold Shift. Actually, let's attach it to this one. There we go. And then click and drag, and I'm going to hold shift to move this. Different polygroup. Let's do it again. Tag a temporary polygroup, click and drag, shift, push it around there. The only reason I did this one, and now I need to insert a new edge loop here, is because I want to be able to take this mesh and see it from the top, basically. All right. So now that I have this one here, I'm going to mirror and well. Remember, I have this as a single subtool. So mirror and well. Now we have these two, and we can now go ahead and hold Control. Oh, let's actually center this piece. I'm going to duplicate that. So it's a separate subtool. I'm going to hold I'm going to hold Shift to snap to like integer numbers in this case. So I'm going to use maybe 90 degrees. Let's duplicate it one more time. Shift. And let's duplicate it one more time. Shift. Around there. And then we can just go ahead and merge all of these together. So merge down, merge down, merge down. Cool. So now we have this effect. Hopefully you can see where I'm going. If we need more, we can just duplicate this and do more, but that's a cool base, I think. Looks sci-fi enough. Now we can go ahead and use let's merge these two together, actually. There we go. And we can use the insert mesh that we've used before. And this one has some like interesting pieces. Let's say something like this will be enough. Click and drag. Let's reposition this a bit better. Right, and from here we can just actually let's scale this up a bit. And from the center, what we can do is just bring in something like this exhaust pipe. Click and drag maybe in this, this direction. All right, so that's going to be the actual tube or pipe that goes up. Make it a little bit longer. Whoops, let's do that again. All right, so something like that should be fine. If we want to increase the thickness of that, we can also use the similar, but I think it's fine. It's just the base is a little bit thicker, or we can just, you know, add an extra bit here. You know, but all of these things are pretty easy. I'm not doing anything crazy. It's just IMM brushes. Cool. This is gonna be actually pretty tiny, so I'm just thinking maybe this is too much. So I'm gonna select this one, invert, and I'm gonna delete hidden. And instead, I'm gonna use something different. It's just that one, the area where I can just actually add this tube was too narrow. Let's leave it without it actually and see what we can do. So I'm gonna select or isolate these polygroups, mask them, invert the mask, bring in the gizmo, scale that up. Now it has a bit more, makes a little bit more sense, and it's also matching kind of like the amount of subdivisions that we had in the original. All right, so that feels a little bit more solid than before. Cool. So now that we have this, I'm gonna go ahead and right click, hold Shift as I move around, and I'm gonna insert these to the brush. So now let's repeat the same process as before. Insert mesh, append, and now we have this that we can, you know, append. That's cool. So we have that. Let's go ahead and do the grid now with some Nanomesh as well, just because it's going to be easier and cool. And I can show you a couple of extra techniques, and then we move into adding those into the mesh. By the way, any of you guys that joined us recently, I shared a link. So I don't know if you can scroll up in the chat. I share a link where you can download this modular IMM brush, so you can follow along or try your own environment. All right, so now we have a duplicate of this, which is this one. I'm going to go into solid mode, and this one is going to be the base for the grid that we're going to create. So what we can do is just scale this up quite a bit. I think that's fine. Let's duplicate it, rotate it, holding Shift 90 degrees. All right, and what I want to do is make sure that I don't move. In fact, let's just give this a polygroup, and I'm going to merge these two together. Right, so we have two different polygroups. I want to make sure that I don't change the ends of these tubes, because I'm going to create like a Nanomesh brush or Nanomesh object that we can use in Nanomesh, basically, to create that grid. But this is going to be just a single intersection of like wires. So I don't want to move the bottom parts. Sorry, the caps, kind of like of this cylinder. So something we can do is just mask everything but the caps. So if you use the Ctrl and click and drag to create a mask, and then hold the Alt key, it's going to give you the inverted mask. It's just it's the same thing as just doing this, or the same thing as doing this and then invert the mask. It's just, if you know those little things, they'll help you speed up the process. So Control, click and drag, and then holding Alt, it save you a couple of clicks or a click. All right, so now we can actually go ahead and start moving these things. I'm gonna mask this one as well. So let me do that. All right, and then I'm gonna use the move brush. Actually, before I do any of that, I'm gonna unify this because it was huge. Let's try that one more time. So Control, and I'm gonna use the move brush with symmetry enable in the Z-axis, I guess, and I'm just gonna push this up. It's too big. There we go. Just want to make sure that I don't distort the actual shape, the cylindrical shape, too much. And around there is fine. So you'll see what I'm trying to do here is this. So I want to have this curvature that roughly fits at half of this other cylinder. So I'm going to repeat the same effect with this cylinder. So I don't have to do it with two. This is just the green one is just a reference. But then when I rotate things around, then this one is going to have the same curvature in here. So you'll see what I mean. This is kind of hard to explain just by drawing on top. Just want to make sure the curvature is fine. And remember, I haven't touched the edges or the caps of the cylinder, so it's totally fine. There are many ways of doing this. This is just a quick way. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and split by groups. So group split. So now I have these two separately. I'm going to keep the green one just as a reference, like I said. Then I can take this one, duplicate it. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees holding Shift key. Oops. Turn off, symmetry off, centered. There we go. And now I'm going to hold Shift again, rotate 90 degrees. 180 degrees. And now we can go ahead and push this up. And that's why I kept the other one as a reference, just roughly to to match the placement of this. Now we can turn this one off, and let's go ahead and merge these two together. In fact, we can tweak this a little bit more. Let's make sure we don't move this. Push this up a bit. Same thing with this one. This one is actually using symmetry, but in X. No, in Y. Let's push that one down. Just roughly touching each other. There we go. Now, if you want, you can actually delete these meshes. Let's go ahead and mesh this down. Also, auto group, C Modular. I'm gonna go ahead and toggle symmetry off. So you can take all of these caps, all of these, the end of these polygroups or tubes, and we can delete those ones, and then we can use the merge vertices or vertex option once we use the Nanomesh. So I'm just tagging the ones that I want to delete. You might not even see the difference, and it's going to be such a tiny thing, but just giving you an idea if you want to do that. Right click, delete. So now we have these tubes like that. Alright, so let's go ahead and turn this into a useful piece that we can actually create some grids out of. For that, I'm gonna use the it doesn't really matter which view, as long as it's kind of like front on view. And let's go to the brush palette. This time I want to create an insert mesh, create a new one, and then I'm going to create a nanomesh out of this. So create nanomesh brush. So you need to have an insert mesh before you create a nanomesh. So that's kind of like the steps. You create whatever mesh you want, turn it into an IMM brush, and then from that IMM brush you can turn that into a nanomesh. So now we can select. I'm actually going to go ahead and save this just in case. Whoops. I'll save this as a grid. Grid nano brush. And I'm going to select a plane 3D. Here we go. And this plane 3D, we can go to the initialize palette and we can change a few things. So I'm going to reduce. Let's make it 20 by 40, and let's just reduce the the H radius to half. Okay, so basically all I did with these numbers is change the square format to be this rectangular format, but these values allow me to keep perfect squares or perfect faces that are squares, just because the number of divisions within the original square is just 20 and 40. So horizontally just 20. So these ones here. I know that this might be too basic, but just an idea of how to plan ahead for the next step, basically. So the H divide is these numbers of divisions horizontally, and the V divide is vertical subdivision, so there's 40 this way, right? So basically half from one side to the other, and then you do the same thing. So horizontal radius is like the width, basically, and that's going to be just half of the vertical width, so it just matches, and that way I make sure that I have a different shape that is not a rectangular shape, that is not a square shape, it's a rectangular shape, but the faces are square. All right, now let's go to make it a polymesh 3D, and this is the one that we're going to use for the nanomesh. So we already have our brush here. Let's go to nanomesh, there we go, and I'm going to right click, make sure that this insert nanomesh is set to polygroup all instead of a single polygon, and I can just click and drag, and now we have this cool grid, right? and we just need to make sure is each cap of the tubes is facing each other. So I'm gonna go ahead and set this to 1. So that's the right size, the full size of that mesh that we created, and then I'm gonna make it into fit. So fit is going to give us a perfect square anyway, and you see it's slightly rotated, it's not matching. That is because when you click and drag, you're probably not having a straight line. So all you have to do is set this back to 0, and now they're matching perfectly. And of course we don't want to see the placement, so I can just click on show placement, and we now have a grid that works quite nicely. All right, so this is kind of like the first step. Then we actually need to invert it and close some of these gaps, because you see it's like one is on top of each other, but they're not sort of like intersecting or interconnecting. I mean, I guess you can just leave it like that, but one way you can just fix this very quickly is to duplicate this entire thing, flip it around. I'll show you what I mean, but if you like this one, it's fine. Another thing that you can do at this point, if you want to have like smaller gaps, is to tile this. So you can tile this a couple of times. Let's say if you use the tile, you need to get rid of the fit and then just use prop or fill. Prop probably. So let's make it 2 and 2, just to show you what you can do with this. And we can reduce the size a tiny bit, 0.5, so half the size, and that way you have more like a smaller version of this grid. But then once you have this, you can start playing around with different patterns, like this, for example. So this is the one that we could exaggerate. So it's almost giving us that shape that we want to. There's some overlapping and some intersecting, but I just want to show you that you can actually generate this effect by simply playing around with these values. I actually don't mind it. I mean, it's exactly what I want. So there's a bit of a overlapping in those meshes, but there's not going to be any close-up. So I think I'm happy with this grid. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it as it is. Actually, let's convert that. So go to inventory, 1 to mesh. So now we have the mesh as it is. I'm going to hold Ctrl and Shift to isolate just the base. Okay, and then I'm going to delete hidden or split hidden, so that we might use that base for something else. And now that I have this grid, I'm going to go to my Modular. No, so yeah, Modular. Hang on, where did I put it? Where's the brush that I'm using? I'm going to have to load it again. I don't know what happened there. Give me 1 second. All right. We're gonna have to do this whole thing again very quickly. So insert mesh, append. Now I have the grid. Insert mesh, append, and we just need to add the pipe. Where is the pipe? Did we just lose it? No. Insert append. Okay, I'm gonna save this one just in case. Cool. So now in the insert mesh we have the grid, we have the control box or whatever, then we have that grid. The rest of smaller details we can definitely make them up with the other brushes. So I think I'm happy with this so far. Let me see if there's any questions so far, and then we move forward into adding those details into our mesh, into our corridor. Yeah, we have plenty of time. Hey Pablo, how are you doing? Good, thanks. Good question. I have the feathers model for your tutorial, and when I load them as a subtool, the texture works fine as an alpha on the meshes, but when I try to make the feathers a brush using curve mode, the texture on the feathers mesh is gone. Is that a way to using them because with a feature as an alpha? Not entirely sure if I get the question, but if you convert any mesh that has texture into a curve brush, you're gonna lose the UVs unless it is tileable. And if you apply it into a mesh that has no UVs, since that's just you need another mesh to apply that curve, and it doesn't have UVs, then you're gonna lose them anyway. So can't think of a workaround for that. Can you include UVs on the grid? Yeah, you could have. I didn't, but you could have. All you have to do is just actually unwrap the original mesh, this piece. So you can unwrap that, and that's it. You can totally do that. Cool. One thing that I forgot to do is that this grid, if I subdivide it, I'm not gonna subdivide it really, because that's a waste of polygons. But yeah, but if you want to make sure, I'm just gonna show you. If you subdivide this, yeah, again, it's not gonna be very obvious, but if I smooth things out, they're not connected, right? That's actually a cool effect. This is like an interesting effect. Hang on. This is kind of like that halftone pattern painted just with the smooth brush. That's kind of cool. I want to try this out later on. Anyway, these are not connected, so you can just go ahead and click on the weld points, and that should weld those caps together. All right. So I want to start with the pipes. So we just need to decide what are we going to use, what mesh we're going to use to insert all of this. And I want to keep them separately from the other meshes because, again, some of them are using Nanomesh, some of them are using array mesh. So unless I want to duplicate it multiple times that fit in the current array mesh, I'm not going to do that. In the case of the pipe, I actually want to do that in this area. Not in the pipe, so I'm just going to try to isolate the one I need. There we go. And remember, this one is just a nanomesh. So because it's not an array mesh, I cannot just click and drag to add it. So what I need to do is access the original nanomesh and edit this from within that nanomesh. So it's actually really easy. We can go to the nanomesh of this object, and again, this is just, remember, a plane that has this mesh. But in the nanomesh in ZBrush, you can go ahead and click on edit mesh, and then you can edit it. You can go ahead and add UVs, whatever. So here is our mesh. So I'm going to spend a bit of time adding some meshes and some details in here, and then we can, once we go out of this edit mesh, is going to be replicated into what we already had. That's why I like to work with this nanomesh in this modular way, so that it's non-destructive in a way. Just quickly edit. All right, so I have the cylinder. I'm gonna hold Shift to snap to the top, click and drag. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. There we go. Click and drag. Something there. hang on. I did something wrong. No. Cannot go back. I have no idea what I did wrong. I just clicked somewhere that I shouldn't have. Okay, I know what happened. Delete one. I know what happened, but we just ruined the other piece. That's annoying. So I just made a mistake, and I actually drag a new nanomesh into this. So this is not a nanomesh, this is an insert brush. Yeah, so that's the problem. It's the problem right there. All right, let's just do it one at a time then, and we just duplicate. Not a problem. All right, so I'm gonna append a cube, and this is what I wanted to do at the beginning anyway, so that we have control on the dynamic subdivision. Just gonna push this out of the way here. This is just a dummy mesh so that we can work on some areas, and I'm gonna toggle this off. All right. Cool. Click and drag. Come on. No, it's not working. Why is this a nanomesh brush? That's what I don't understand. This wasn't a nanomesh. This was just an insert brush. All right, let me just figure this out, because I changed this quite a bit. So that's not it. That's not it. Found a problem. I found a problem. All right. So I'm gonna add the mesh, the grid mesh. Let's just recap. Forget about the last 10 minutes. We're back to the grid. So I'm gonna take that grid, and this is my IMM brush, just to be sure. No, it's still a nanomesh brush. All right, I'm gonna create insert. So insert mesh, append. There we go. And I'm just gonna use a plain 3D very quickly just to test this brush and see what's going on. It shouldn't be a... Anyway, let's go ahead and deconstruct this brush. So if we go to the geometry palette, I just need to remember what it is actually. Modify topology. Modify topology should be around here. Mesh from brush. Create mesh from brush. I think this is the one. So if we need to reverse engineer this brush and make it an IMF. So if we go to the geometry palette, and here we have this mesh from brush. If I click on that, it just gives me this the selected mesh in the current nanomesh brush. It gives me that. So I'm gonna duplicate this, select this one, mesh from brush, duplicate, select this one, mesh from brush, duplicate, mesh from brush, duplicate that. So yeah, I just have to, I don't know at what point I saved on top of that one on the original that we had. Not a big deal. We can just gonna take us this extra time to recreate that brush, but nothing is lost. Mesh from brush, duplicate a couple more times, duplicate, and that one. All right, so let's go back to what we had. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna save this as a different tool just in case. I'm just gonna call it Sci-Fi pieces. All right, now let's go ahead and reset all of this. So I'm gonna go to solo mode. Where's the floor? There's the floor. So solo mode, and I'm gonna go through all of the pieces, making sure they're facing the right way. Yep, perfect. So that's all I needed to check. Now we can go to the brush palette, and we can just go ahead and click on create insert multi-mesh brush. So because all of the meshes are currently facing us, I don't have to do it manually, like one at a time. We can just create all of the subtools that we currently have. So click on that, and now we have this IMM brush. Great. And that means that we can now, yeah, finally we can use it. Now I'm gonna save this one. There we go. All right, back on track. So if we select the corridor, now I forgot where the corridor was. Yeah. I'm gonna hide this cube. And let's try this one more time. So select the wall, turn off array mesh. All right, and now this, whoops. So now this one works fine. So let me explain very quickly the mistake that I made. For some reason, the IMM brush that we had, it just got turned into a Nanomesh brush at some point. I don't remember when. So when we went ahead and selected this mesh that is basically a Nanomesh, really. So it's just a series of faces, and each face has one of these meshes instead as a Nanomesh. When we went inside and edit that, we added a Nanomesh to that. So it's basically like nesting Nanomeshes within Nanomeshes, and that's the crazy part. So now that we have this, that we know what happened, we can go ahead and try to do the same thing. So let's click on Edit Mesh, and now this is an insert mesh, it's not a Nanomesh. So we can click with the pipe selected, click and drag around there, and that shouldn't give us any issue right now. Push that in, and I'm gonna actually, whoops, clear the mask. Oh, it's kind of like in an angle actually. All right, I'm gonna mask these bits embedded, and I'm gonna push them up around there. We can edit it later. So that's all I wanted to do before. Just add in this, and then click on Edit Mesh, and it will be updated. All right. So hopefully you can rewind and see what went wrong in there. But that's basically it. Right. So now it works the way that it was supposed to work. Any chance you will open up your creature pack IMM brush for sale for charity for the virus relief? That's actually a good idea. I will ask the other artists how they feel about it, because again, it's just a collaboration. But I might. Hey Javier, how's it going? erase all before clicking on the IMM brush. That might have been the problem. Yeah, well spotted. Cool. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and do the rest of the stuff, just adding a bit more of details. Again, the grid is going to be for the floor, and this box is this is one of the things that I would suggest. Like, if you're doing this type of stuff where you have repetitive patterns and things that are duplicated multiple times, if you have something like this box that is very very unique in a way, you know, very well designed, very intricate, and then you duplicate that multiple times, it's just not gonna look as good. It's just gonna look clearly like a duplicate. So things that are very feature-like, I like to use them in just some spots, not everywhere, and that's also another reason why I kept the original wall very simple, very clean in a way. It's just the kind of like this panel and the areas that are hollow for the lights that are, you know, that you can spot as a repetitive pattern, but it's pretty simple. So I wouldn't use this box, this switches box that I created here for every piece. So what I'm doing now is what I'm going to do now is take that grid and go into the edit mesh again, take my grid, and I'm going to click and drag here to add it there. Go with my Gizmo, rotate a tiny bit, and I'm just gonna maybe scale it up a bit and place this inside. All right, just gonna check that everything's working fine. So now every piece has this grid, and remember, we're using this in combination with an array mesh. So all of these things that we're doing in just a single piece, like modularly, is going to be duplicated because of the Nanomesh, and or extended because of the Nanomesh, and it's also going to be duplicated to the other side because of the array mesh. So we're using a combination of those two things. Let's save as a progression. Cool. That's it. That's looking good. Now let's go ahead and move on to another brush. If I can find it. Yeah, IMM model kit. I'm gonna select that one. I'm gonna edit mesh, and I'm just gonna have some fun here with some of these panels and pieces. So I'm gonna take this grid, or this, yeah, it's kind of like a grid, and I'm gonna add it around there. Bring the Gizmo, I'm gonna reset the rotation just so that it's straight. And I want to push this in so that we see, similar to what we did with the box. Hold Control, click and drag, move it to the other side. It's just a couple of ventilation type of thing. I might want to use some of these ones as well as a way to replicate some patterns. So let's try this panel. Click and drag. This one is going to be a bit more obvious. So this part is just, you know, really fun. Trying to figure out which areas go in where, which parts you can add to what. The only thing that you need to keep in mind in this case, and this might be something that I do at the end, which is converting these nanomesh into something useful, like just mesh, or create that turn that nanomesh into a useful working mesh. Just because the difference between all of these meshes that I'm adding, if I use dynamic subdivision, it's going to be a mess for many reasons. One of them is, for example, the grid has a lot of geometry and it's just tiny, so it's gonna be pretty heavy. The other reason is that the amount of subdivision in this one, the one that we just added, which actually I don't like anymore, so I'm gonna remove that, is going to be very different from the rest. So I'm just trying to figure out the best way to place all of these objects. I just want to create some sort of additional paneling with them. And when you have like little gaps like this, it's really good to sort of like overlap certain things, and that just adds complexity, visual complexity to the whole thing. We just add a couple of these ones here. Well, doesn't really make sense, but maybe this one. There we go. So for this, this could be an area where I don't know, some kind of cable goes through and it's kind of like holding it. So I can use these. Just trying to find the right angle. Hold Control, click and drag just to duplicate. About there maybe. And then I'm going to let go of the control without letting go of the click, and that's what I mentioned before, to duplicate, and it's going to maintain that exact, you know, the exact distance between them. And these will have different polygroups, so I can select them easily, invert the mask, and just try to reposition this a little bit better. Alright, let's go ahead and add some bolts. These ones are going to be tiny, so let's define the size of them with the actual brush size. So I'm going to click, hold Control, bring in the Gizmo, push that in, and I'm going to do the same thing. Hold Control, whoops, hold Control, again, Control. This time it's going to be slightly different. So they're not going to have the same space between this and this, obviously, but now between this area and the next one, we can do that. So Control, click and drag roughly there. Whoops. Control, click and drag. Control, click and drag about there. Then now let go of the control, and then we can just do this. Then Control, click and drag about here, and another one there. All right. We can also add a couple more in there. It's too big, maybe it's smaller. Right, so these are the type of details that I would do at this stage, just spending some time adding stuff that, you know, it kind of like makes sense. I'm gonna use a different mesh for the light. There was a tube here, this pipe, for example. This one, yeah, this one should be fine. Maybe this one, just to make it more interesting. So this is gonna be kind of like a tungsten tube. I actually don't mind that over there. As an additional element of the design. So I wasn't planning to do that one there, but it's kind of cool. We'll just fix something in here for an additional tube or something. But I'm going to duplicate then this one, and I'm just going to place that inside there. So this is going to be the actual geometry that I could use in Keyshot as, or in any other render really, to add light to this area. All right, let me just try to fix that, this bit in here. You can do that with a couple of objects. We'd add some ventilation and grids later on. Maybe this pipe or something that is closed. Let's use this. No, it's not working. That's not gonna work in there. So I'm gonna use this, give it a polygroup, just so that I can manipulate it easier. And let's just keep it simple and stretch it out from the top. So mask this bit and move this one all the way there. All right, so let's go ahead and check how everything's looking. Nice. I'm not too convinced about the bottom one. Should look better with the cables, but it might be too exposed. So let's edit that, invert that, delete hidden. Now we can figure out something more interesting for the bottom. So that's another reason I like to, go back and forth and just make sure that whatever I'm doing in here, it kind of like makes sense in the design. Let's go down to the bottom. We're gonna add some grids in here. So some of these ones might look actually cool. This vent. I'm gonna add that one here. It's a little bit too big, no? It's a bit too big. It's cool because doing this, although you're just inserting pre-made meshes, you're actually trying to design as you go. So I think this one works fine. It's just another ventilation area, I guess. I'm gonna use this tool, which it's just a suspension thing, but we can make use of that and make it a bit more interesting. If we hide some pieces or some parts of it, it's gonna stretch it out. Alright, I think it's not too bad, but it really doesn't make sense to have it there. So let's just undo that. Oh, here's another vent that we could use. Just want to keep it simple. I don't want to add too many of these things, but maybe just another one in here will be just fine. And it sort of helps to soften the edges of this a little bit. Maybe let's duplicate it. And again, these are just insert meshes. There's nothing too complicated here. I'm gonna use these to add some kind of like paneling in this area. I think it needs it. We'll just need to bring it closer maybe. All right, so just adding these little things just to break apart the elevation on those planes, I think it would help with the visual contrast. And again, I don't want to overdo it because we're gonna, you know, this is being duplicated anyway. Let's see what this one can give us. It's gonna try to match the size a little bit of that gap and then push it in. And again, it's just an extra detail to add variation in the height of that piece. And what I'm trying to do with the scaling in this case, I'll give you an idea in just a second. It's a tricky one, but hopefully you see what I mean. So what I was trying to do with that one, in terms of the design and the visual that I'm trying to create with the diagonals, is try to, from this angle, try to maintain this line, this diagonal line, parallel with this one, and also maybe this corner. Well, in a way, it's not perfect, but maybe I can push it down a bit with this. So that's just little things that maintain like a cohesive language, although the pieces are kind of like random anyway. Clear that mask. So I think this is looking a lot more interesting now. And let's take the edit mesh, and this is looking all right. So let's also take a look at the array mesh, and let's go to our stored cam. And this is one of the renders. Hang on. Render perspective off. So, you know, there's a lot more details in this in the walls, and I think it's looking good. Let's go ahead and get out of this array mesh, go back to our Nanomesh. We can add a couple more things just to make it more interesting. I want to break this line a little bit more so that it's not as straight. I want to save this as a different mesh, just as a progression of it. And let's check if you guys have any questions. I'm going to take a quick break just to bring some water. I've been talking too much. Cool. Hey Chris, long time no see you around here. How you doing? I haven't seen you in the Extra Mile community for a while either. Hope everything's well with you. Hey Nayan, which steps you are using in sculpting, Nanomesh, or subdivision? I use everything depending on the project and depending on what I'm trying to achieve. Is more about the outcome and how you want to get there. I would probably use Nanomesh as a starting point, or Sculptris Pro, and then retopologize, move into subdivision. So I use all of those. Okay, so I want to start adding a bit more of this break this line. This is what I was talking about before. So this is kind of like too squarish for me, which is working fine for now, but maybe if I add some of these meshes kind of like intersecting like around this area, I will be able to, you know, give it a bit more of a visual interest in the visual interest there. Same thing for this, I don't know, some area right here. Those are the areas that I'm sort of trying to find, but I don't want to overdo the details. I want to make sure everything still pretty clean and there's a lot of space that is plain. All right, so we're gonna do that in the next few steps. Okay, I'll be back. Just give me 2 seconds. All right. Here we are back again. Let's just think, what else can we do about this? We said that we're gonna break this line a little bit. So let's get into Edit Mesh again. And let's go ahead and try something different. It needs to be maybe this one. Yeah, I think this one might be a good one actually. If we do this like that. And again, I'm just trying to keep an eye on the lines that I use. Okay, so about there. Cool. And then we can use, you know, just masking to extend certain areas. So I'm gonna mask this bit and push this one a bit more. Then mask, oops. Again, this has a polygroup, so we can isolate that. Mask that, invert the mask, and then mask this area. Bring the gizmo and we can push this down so that it kind of like makes sense. About there. And I think, well, this one is kind of like an annoying gap. So let's go ahead and fix that. I'm gonna mask everything but just these ones in here, these points. I'm gonna push them in about there. Not entirely sure if that's the right move, or if I just push these ones. Yeah, I think it's fine. The other thing I want to do is make sure that there's no, I mean that this one goes all the way in. Ah, come on. So what I want to do actually is just mask these polygons at the back, bring back everything, invert the mask. So now only the back is masked and I can push that to the back. All right, so it kind of like creates this more interesting shape. So it's obviously there's more area now, like a flat area here that we can add some stuff. So let's just give that a go. Rotating 90 degrees. I think it's fine, but it might be too small. We'll see. All right. So if I hold Control, click and drag, and then around there, let go. It's gonna duplicate that nicely. So they're like three compartments in this area. We just need to create some kind of like hinges or something. So we can do that with some of the pipes. Where are the pipes? So this IMM kit has a lot of stuff that you can play around with. This is another one here. So click and drag, rotate 90 degrees, scale down. All right, so they might do the trick this bit. cannot like concentrating on this to make it fit. All right, so I'm gonna actually put it in here and do the same trick, holding Control to duplicate till I find the right spot in here, and then let go, and it will just be duplicated almost there. kind of like eyeballing it. All right. So I'm happy with this. I might just add a couple more just little bolts or screws somewhere. Like for example this one with the size of my brush. I think the size is fine. I'm just gonna add them here, holding Ctrl. And the good thing about using Ctrl in this case is that because it's gonna match the right size of the brush, is that I can just hold Ctrl and then rotate things around so it doesn't look exactly the same. Use those in there, and we just add a couple more here since this looks kind of like a paneling. Alrighty, so I think I'm about to finish with this. I might just add something else here, like another pipe, and we call it a day for this this piece. So let's try this pipe. I just want something kind of like embedded in this area. Alright, so I think that looks better. Let's get out of this, and it is duplicated in the Nanomesh, so it's looking good. Cool. I think that works as it is. We can of course change the symmetry of like the repetition of this pattern when we do some kind of like cables around and that sort of thing, but I think it's working. Let's get the other ones, the other meshes going. This is not the one. Floor, this bit, and all right, cool. So I'm gonna use the frame of the door, which is here, this one. Go into solo mode, and actually let's get out of solo mode and just hide this, and sorry, hide everything except the door and this, and perhaps this bit as well, just so that we have an idea of where to place the other piece, which is that box. So I think it makes sense to have it on the right hand side, depending on the render. Maybe on this side, so that we have more, we can see more of the detail that we created on the right hand side. So that's the switch there. Cool. Now that we have placed this and we sort of like know where it goes, we can now go into solo mode, clear that mask, and then we can work on some pipes of tubing that goes from underneath this, and we can do that with another IMM brush, or with the same one really, the IMM model kit. So I'm going to use these pipes that has like a hollow area, and that's going to be kind of like a thick one. There we go. And another one, maybe not as thick, or a couple of these ones. Maybe on a diagonal. Alright, so those are the kind of like things that I want to do. Maybe kind of like an antenna. This pipe would do the trick. It kind of looks like an antenna anyway. All right, and then for the tubes, we can simply use the curve brush. So I'm going to select the curve brush here. And since this is like a flat area anyway, we can just do this. And then we can go to the stroke palette and we can tweak some of the stuff for the brush. So I want to make sure, I want to leave snap off so it doesn't snap to the borders. Actually, before I do that, see how it is kind of like half embedded into the mesh? We can just push this out like this, embedded, and this is something that is within your brush palette. If you go down to the curve brush, the depth brush, the depth cell palette, this is the thing that I have here in my UI. So if you click once again, it's gonna look like outside of the, like it's not embedded into that. So that's just a quick thing that we can do. I'm gonna leave the snap off and I'm gonna turn the lock start and lock end, so that, you know, we don't move this bit and we can just tweak this a little bit better. But before I do that, I'm just gonna go ahead and place the starting point, and I'm actually enabling elastic so we can increase the amount. We could potentially do the same thing for this area here. Now let's turn off elastic and we can tweak the placement. I want to turn off this repetition here and leave the solo off, so that because the thing with solo is every time that you click when you're tweaking this, is going to basically isolate that, right? So that is the idea. All right, so this tube or this pipe really, or a hose, whatever, just with multiple pipes, multiple cables goes in there. Another thing that we can do at this point is, if we want to reuse this and we don't have to draw it again, a very simple thing we can do is go to the stroke palette and you can click on a snapshot. So snapshot is going to drop the tube that we created already in the canvas, but it's not going to delete that curve that we have. So if I click snapshot, all I have to do, I already have that mesh kind of like locked in, and I can take this stroke or this the curve really, and then just push this here and just start moving this around. So that's what I want to do. Obviously not intersecting with each other, and I want a smaller tube that goes in here. So I can reduce the size of my brush, click on it, and there we go. I'm going to place this one a little bit better. All right. And we can just work on, you know, make it a more interesting design. So this, just by doing this, since this is going to be kind of like a feature piece, you can break the symmetry of that pattern that we've been creating with the Nanomesh brush and all that. Alrighty, let's do the same thing for the next one, and we already have the thickness anyway. So snapshot, move this to the other side. This one is slightly off as well. I'm just going to enable elastic so that I have more control. Elastic, what it does, in case you don't know, is just allows you to and increase the amount of geometry in the curve with an elastic mode. All right, this is just a matter of tweaking the placement of this, making sure that it's not overlapping. We can use the liquid as well with a large editing size of the brush, just to add a bit more of a, more gravity here, and just add extra length to this. And then you can also reduce the brush size, click and then hold shift just to smooth the curve. So that's just another quick way to smooth that curve. Cool. All right. So now we have basically those three tubes going into that switch box, the one that controls the door, whatever. And then we can still use this plain set of planes that that we can use to add tubes or insert meshes and that sort of thing. So I'm about like three minutes to finish. So if you guys have any questions about this, otherwise I think I'm gonna leave it here and do another quick render afterwards, just to show you the progress. And I reckon for the next week we'll wrap it up. Because again, it's more of the same. It's just adding more details. I might actually do that afterwards, after the stream, just add a few more details, so that next time it's just a matter of finishing it up and using a whole bunch of other stuff like deformers and finalizing the Nanomesh and the array meshes, just so that it is an editable mesh, just so that we can complete the concept. Just very quickly, I think I'm gonna do another thing very, very quick. So if I select the plane now, the plane for the floor, sorry, I'm gonna go ahead and use this Modular to create some insert right in the middle. And then I'm going to bevel that around there. I want to make sure I match kind of like the center line of that door. Or kind of like it's kind of like in line with the door anyway. All right. And thank you. Sorry, those are the perks of working from home now. Get a special deliveries, special coffee delivery. Anyway, so we can take these now, tag these, use the Q mesh, and I can push these down tiny bit. And I'm just gonna delete this one and the other side as well. Oh, hang on, I did something wrong again. Oh, I pushed it up. You know what, let's just leave it. Let's keep it simple. I'm just gonna do a tiny little step in there. And then I'm gonna bevel all of this, or just tag all of this, and insert. I want to use insert each poly, add a different polygroup, Q mesh, and I'm going to push this down. All right, so I'm going to delete these ones. All right, so what I want to do here is just add another piece, or like another one of those grids that I made. So let's use that grid very quickly. Just want to make sure it is close to the base. All right, so let's put this one in the right place, and hopefully this works again. So hold Control, click and drag about that, and then just move it up. All right, cool. So now we have that grid as well working nicely there, and then we can just simply add maybe some tubes or a pipe, a set of pipes or set of tubes that go inside that sort of like that gap, and the grids just to cover that. But I think it's working rather well. So let's go ahead and turn everything on just so that you see where we are at with all the details and stuff. So let's take that right wall, go to Array Mesh, enable that. All right, so lots of details and stuff on the walls. But yeah, that's about it, guys, for me today. Again, one last minute question. I'm happy to answer those. Otherwise, we'll leave it here, and in the next week, yeah, I think next week will be fine. Next week we'll finalize all of these, just adding the rest of the kind of like asymmetrical details, so just to give it a little bit more character to this scene, and then we can just move into other areas. So if there's nothing else, I'll leave it here, and I'll see you next week. I'm gonna do a quick render and share it on social media. Oh, by the way, just a couple of things before I go. For those of you who have bought the digital clay pack, thank you so much. It's actually been really amazing, the response that it has had over the past few weeks. A lot of artists have been using it and creating amazing stuff. I'm just going to show you. So the ZBrush Central right now is packed with like clay brush, the more traditional clay approach, like this one from Gabriel Suarez is amazing. So 4 top rows, Magdalena, Andrea Castro, and Derek. So this really, showcases the power of those brushes, and just in an effort to, incentivize everyone to use them, because I think they're really cool. I'm going to be adding an update. So I'm going to create an update for this pack. So a few extra brushes. So let me know which one is your favorite brush of the pack for those of you who have bought it already. Let me know what your favorite one is. I'm going to do a quick update as well and show and share with you some new materials, which I have here, but I have a few other ones. So these are clay materials that are really cool for sculpting and also for presentation, and I have a few other ones that I'll share with you. So this Tasty Metal is a really cool one. Obviously this piece is not the best for showing what this can do, so there we go. Let me do something quickly before I go. Let's use base smudging. So this Tasty Metal material. So I'm going to share with you guys. This is going to be a free update, of course. So if you have the brushes, so expect this. So these are the different materials that I have for ZBrush, and they're really cool for sculpting with that sort of like clay look. And I'm going to be sharing all of these ones as well, including the new brushes that I'm going to add to the pack. There's this deep blue as well that is kind of like cool. Another material inside ZBrush, and another one that I made recently, the Copper Rosa. But yeah, so it's about 10 new materials that come with that update. So yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, so 10 new materials that that come with the pack. So if you have already bought it, what's going to happen is at some point soon, I hope, you'll receive an email with the same email that you used to get the pack, saying, hey, there's a new update, and just go there and get it. It's going to be free, like I said, and some extra brush as well. Yeah, so that's what I want to say. And the other thing as well is I haven't closed that sort of like soft launch of the extra mile course. So for any of you guys that want to join us in the extra mile, the course remains closed, but given the circumstances and everyone kind of like having probably more time on their hands working from home, I'm accepting enrollment by request. So if you want to join us, and if you have heard of the course before and you haven't had a chance to join us before, just send me an email to my email, any of the emails that are on the website, and I'll generate a link just for you guys to enroll in the course. Other than that, that's it from me, guys. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll see you next time.